it's mold.
Yes.
Yeah. How prevalent?
Gosh, in our practice now, so it's a little nuanced, and I just want to paint that picture. So there are groups that will do like beginners carnivore, and that's not the people that join us. And people will use a lot of my YouTube content or podcast information or the books that I've written, and they will get our free elimination guide. So it's people that are pretty much like advanced carnivore or have tried carnivore for a while, and then it doesn't work enough, and so then they come to us. Some of them have heard about SIRS now or mold illness, so then they'll say, I think I have mold illness, I'd like to get tested. But then there's a subset will come to us and say, hey, I still have gut issues, or my autoimmune antibodies aren't going down like I've heard from the rest of the carnivore community. I need more help. And then we will work on gut protocols or other things so that they don't have to do mold. But I would say of the subset that it's carnivore is not working enough, I think over 80% probably is suffering from some type of mold illness.
And in that subset, what are they struggling with? Like, what are their biggest symptoms that you see?
Brain fog. So it's interesting. There's difference in people, but I would say the biggest thing is, so there's a subset that has a lot of pain, and obviously it could be a mix of both, but lots of pain, joint pain, fatigue, lots of tiredness, can't really do much, can't really exercise. They're likely not getting enough oxygen in their system, and then there's a lot of mental illness. What I found so fascinating is we have a subset of people that have been diagnosed with either major depression, bipolar disorder, some type of mental illness, and they all have SIRS. So I just wonder, was it ever really a mental illness issue? Yeah. But more, and they believe the mental illness issue because their parents or their grandparents also had a mood disorder. And it's like, no, but mood or the mold with the genetic type, maybe it was that grandparent too that was also suffering from mold illness, and instead they were diagnosed with, you need to go see a psychiatrist. And it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, mold mimics a lot of things, doesn't it?
It's a multi-system, multi-symptom. So you will have multiple symptoms. It could be hormone, lack of sleep, highly stressed, mood imbalances, gut issues, skin issues. It's literally everything, and then all the systems. So all the systems get impacted. And so what we see, or what I've seen in the wellness space, because I didn't grow up in the wellness space. So I didn't care about nutrition. I didn't care about wellness. I was in the business world, and then I got sick, and then I had to care about it. And so what I see trends in the wellness space, and there's a subset that will think it's just minerals, right? Or it's just hormones, or it's just that you're highly stressed and you have high levels of cortisol, or it's that you have mold illness and it's affecting your antidiuretic hormone, which is impacted by your pituitary. And your pituitary is the one that determines the release of antidiuretic hormone, which if that marker is imbalanced, you will feel thirsty, you will pee all the time, you will feel electrolyte imbalances. And when you're eating carbohydrates, you don't notice the imbalances as much because you have extra water in your system. But when you eat keto or low carb or carnivore, you have less water retention, and so you feel the electrolyte imbalances more. So when people tell me, I've been carnivore or keto for X amount of years and I still cannot balance my minerals, I know that's an indication that they may have an imbalance in ADH, which can be likely because of mold. And so there's all these interesting things. Same thing with hormones. The master hormone that gets impacted is melanocyte stimulating hormone, and then all your androgens get affected. So when people tell me I have low testosterone, yes, lots of modern day things affect testosterone, but it's also because of mold. And same thing with DHEA and other hormones not balancing. Your cortisol gets impacted when your body's in this constant fight or flight. Well, that's what mold does to your body. The mold, its natural point in life is to degrade something that's dying to bring new life. And so if it's in your body, obviously it's going to impact your cortisol levels and cause stress on the body, because the body really wants to heal from this, but there's a subset of people that cannot heal alone with mold, I think, even if they get out of a bad building. A lot can heal from just getting out of a bad building, but sometimes we need additional supports like binders and detox supports as well.
What do you find is the most helpful for those people that they're out of their building and you're sure that they're not still in mold? Because then there's that subset too, right?
So
the people
difficult.
that leave mold for mold, What do you find is helping them the most?
So getting out of the building is such a big one. I think the other one is using a type of binder. So if they can get support, so if mold or water damaged buildings causes issues, and it's not just fungal, it also releases bacteria and so endotoxins, actinomycetes, fungus, and then there's the VOCs and stuff. But if you can have a support, because our modern world is also really toxic. Imagine you're drinking water that has fluoride and all these heavy metals, and then you're eating GMO plants with all these pesticides and antimicrobials. So you're already against so much and then you're dealing with mold illness. So if you can take a binder, and I guess it would really depend on the person, like how strong of a binder, but we have seen efficacy with cholestyramine. Now I know it's a really strong binder, but if you're eating high fat, you can probably tolerate it better. We've seen its efficacy because it will stop the bile in your gut, and then in the bile, when you eat a higher fat or if you eat a meal, it'll pull the biotoxins from the bile and then you'll poop it out. But we don't see everybody heal from that. And I do think some of it is also the mind body. So we have seen a correlation with people that are really sick with mold illness, have a lot of trauma in their past. So as a child, they've had some significant traumas. Mom wasn't around, dad wasn't around, they didn't have good attachment, or other things have happened. And so their view of the world is a lot worse than the average person. And so they might wake up and their mind is racing, their cortisol is like pouring out of their system. And we have found that even balancing that, like the view of the world changes, your values in the world changes, your desire of, I just want health and love and connection and finding peace and not focusing on the negatives. We've seen people heal so much with that. So we also have a mind body program for that reason. But you have to change. If you wake up and then you feel a little achy and you're like, oh no, I must be experiencing mold, and then you start looking around and you're looking for mold, you have a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, and it is literally looking for what you are thinking. So if you believe that there's mold in the room and that's making you sick and that's why you're not well, your reticular activating system is going to look for that and scan it in all of the things you do all day long, whether you're hyper aware of it or not, and it's going to validate what you believe. So why not use that reticular activating system to then view that I can heal from this illness, that I am in a much cleaner environment, that I am taking my binders, whichever ones I can tolerate, or I'm doing a detox, or I'm sweating, or doing all the things, but I am focusing on that I am going to heal. This is the answer, and I'm going to heal. But the hardest thing is, I think with mold illness, it also impacts your brain, so it's harder to not be in that loop. But we see people that will, one day be strong enough, and then the next day they're kind of like, this isn't working. And then they start falling down this negative spin. And so I think mindset really works, binders. If you can have any amount of movement, I know not everyone can move, but if you can move, you just help your lymphs and the body just sort of be able to get more oxygen in the system, get more, of your hemoglobins moving around so that you have oxygen in your body, because that's something that mold deprives you of. So if you could work on all of those things, that would be really good. And I think this one's kind of hard. I don't bring it up a ton because I want to be mindful, but I think connection is really important. So you have to have strong relationships. Like you have to have a strong why to continue. And we see families where, especially the husband, doesn't believe the wife, and then there's turmoil. We've even had couples where they're like, do you know a therapist that we could talk to? Because my wife or husband doesn't believe me. And so you can see that inner turmoil where the patient wants to heal and the patient is so bent on healing and believing, and then let's say they have a bad day, then it's so easy for the significant other to go, yeah, it's because it's BS. It's not a real disease. And then your confidence in the illness starts dropping, or the possible healing. So I think a lot of that really matters, having a strong support system, community to know that when you're struggling, like, hey, I've been there, you'll be fine. I promise you can heal from this. And doing some of that mind body, and then any detox protocols you may need, or like nutritional sufficiency stuff that you've talked about on my podcast.
Yeah. So mind body, you see a lot of that though. So you said you had a program. What kinds of things are you doing?
So our mind body program covers everything. So because I struggled with an eating disorder, I didn't know that. I thought I had an eating disorder because I just wanted to be thin. You know, I grew up in Los Angeles. It was the cool thing to do is to be thin. But I realized shortly after that I was using it as an escape, a way to cope, a way to deal with stuff where I wasn't giving myself self-care. And as I went through my therapy, I learned that, for example, I had childhood or core wounds where I didn't feel like I was enough. And so I would then try to be a perfectionist from it. And in that perfectionism, because no one can be perfect, that level of stress and anxiety and not being able to perform, I would then turn to my coping strategy, which was food. And then I would binge and purge and go through this dopamine cycle and shame and then go through it all over again. So in our mind body program, we know of that. So we definitely believe that people that have trauma in their past, if they've never gone through it, forgiven people or processed it properly, and they're just sort of putting it under the rug, they still have it. Like the body still keeps the score, and maybe it's manifesting as autoimmune. What's so interesting is there's a theory out there, there's a subset of people that believe that for people that have no good boundaries, their body will create antibodies, an autoimmune illness, so that it physically makes them have to separate from people because they're not able to have a strong boundary. And so we definitely touch on diet, lifestyle, sleep, all of those good things. And then we also talk about how if you have a childhood wound, and there's 5, I'll touch on a couple. There's you could have a wound of trust. So maybe when you had some friends and they broke your trust, and then now you have a hard time trusting people. So the level you can be intimate with someone else may be impacted. There's some called prioritization. So maybe your parents were so busy working all the time, or they were dealing with their own stuff, so they weren't really around and they didn't make you feel prioritized. So then you learn to not need other people, or that you prioritize yourself and you just figure things out on your own. There's also one of belonging. So maybe you got bullied when you were a child. And so then you learn that maybe if I just don't share my opinion, then maybe I will belong then. Or maybe if I'm just like the wall on the flower on the wall, then maybe no one will not think that I belong. And so we carry these wounds with us, and we sort of use these wounds to sort of, have our daily marching orders. But it's in those where we're not being fully honest with ourselves that people then are living almost double lives, and then they start getting sick too. And so we talk about core wounds, we talk about family relationships, trauma, we talk about diet, nutrition, and then we talk about all the tools then to support that. So we believe that core wounds, if you have them and you've never dealt with them, a lot of people then, with the discomfort you feel when you're older, you turn to an addiction. And it's not that it starts as an addiction. Your body learns like, oh, Judy liked food and that there was a dopamine kick, and I'm going to remember that neural pathway because every time Judy feels sad, I can go back to that. And that's the quick response. And so we teach our brain to go that way, but until it becomes an addiction. And so I think a lot of addiction and mood imbalances is because something's wrong that we're not trying to uncover. And so we try to break all of those things and open it up. And we talk about family dynamics. And then the healing part of it is all the tools to rewire, to basically change your habit of going to the food or going to whatever addiction, figuring out, are there some toxic relationships in your life, or are there communication patterns that aren't ideal for you? And so we talk through all that stuff. And then we just make people very hyper aware of like, where is your true feelings in this moment? And are you being honest? Are you having proper boundaries? Are you speaking up for yourself? And so that then with illness, you have less stress, you have less cortisol because you're not just, swallowing all your feelings and storing it inside you, so that maybe, hopefully, your immune system can start really healing. Because if you're in a stress state, your immune system is weakened. And then in addition to that, our first line of defense from our immune system is our mast cells. It's a type of white blood cell. And that mast cell is also in our brains. So if we feel like we were slighted, or that we're not speaking our truth, or that we're not having proper boundaries, and we feel like we're being used or abused, we start to feel that in our system. We release cortisol, but our mast cells also start getting activated. And if you think about mast cells, it's all not the autoimmune, but the allergenic type of symptoms that everyone gets with oh my gosh, I ate chicken and I feel sensitive, or I ate pork and that gives me a histamine response. No, it's normally that your toxic bucket is super full now. And could it be that some of it is that you are not taking care of your mind body, and so it's super full, and then now add mold to that and it's just filling over. So we think it's the one chicken, but I highly doubt it's just the chicken.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always multifactorial, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what you found with carnivore in your practice, that it just, as a diet, covers so many bases of it's low histamine, it's no gluten, it's low oxalate, and it just fits a lot of the trigger points that are very common in people that are struggling with mold?
Yes, I think that if we think of diet and nutrition as one facet for healing, and it's a big one. So if we don't eat, we will die, right? So if we can get the most nutrient dense, bioavailable, so the most nutritionally assimilating nutrients from our foods, and meat is the easiest to digest, right? With plants, you need to either cook it down, or you need, if you eat it raw, it really like affects your gut. And some people can't even do the conversion of like beta carotene to vitamin A, for example. But if you eat meat, which is in its most easiest form that our bodies can assimilate, even if you have bad gut dysfunction, that helps the nutrition, so your body even has a fighting chance, that your immune system even has a fighting chance. And then from there, all modern disease is low-grade inflammation. And if you think about low-grade inflammation, it's like the seed oils we're eating, the gluten that you mentioned, the seeds, the grains that we eat that are, stored in these places that breed mold in itself. And so if we can reduce the noise from even our foods, so that when our immune system is lined against our intestinal wall to decipher, is this food a friend or a foe, or this protein that's coming in, that if we can just reduce that noise by eating a purely elimination diet of an all meat carnivore diet, then we can see, well, what else, or is it just the diet that you're suffering from? Mm-hmm. Is your autoimmune just diet related, or is there something else? And that's the power, in my opinion, of why we use carnivore. It gives you the most nutrient density. It's super simple. Like, you don't have to remember, wait, which plant of this, that can I eat or not? And then beyond that, it's, are you just suffering from food illnesses? And if it's not, that's how we're getting to mold so quickly, because we're like, yeah, you've done beef, salt, and water for a few months and you're still not moving the needle enough, and you've done all the gut supports that we know pretty much work for most people. Like, at that point, there's something beyond that.